to Standard Chartered presents the CNBC TV 18 Leadership Collective. I'm Shereen, Bhan. Now, enough has been said and written about COVID-19, how it's impacted life, business, and economies around the world. India has been no exception. After a degrowth of almost 24% in Q1 year-on-year, the economic outlook for FY21 has been pegged at a contraction of 9.5%, this by the RBI just last week. Add to that the upward trajectory of the CPI inflation, which is touched 7.34% in September, rising for the sixth month, which the Reserve Bank believes is transitory, a significant shortfall in tax collections, a high fiscal deficit. The macros are challenging. But in this backdrop, the government has announced several measures under the Atmanirbhar Bharat package to boost manufacturing growth and drive both domestic and foreign investments to India. At the CNBC TV 18 Leadership Collective, we've always tried to do a deep dive into issues that matter and brainstorm with people that make a difference. The idea is to create a roadmap for growth that is both sustainable and equitable. Well, joining me now, first, RP Sanjeev Sanyal, the Principal Economic Advisor, to deliver the keynote address. Mr. Sanyal, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. Well, let me start by giving you your introductory comments on why you believe India is positioned to become the new factory of the world.
Shereen, it's a pleasure to be on your channel once again. As far as your question is concerned, let me say that the last 6 months have obviously been very, very difficult for the world economy, and India has not been an exception to that. But if you look through world history, you will see there are these structural breaks. And maybe the last time we had such a major structural break anywhere in the world was during the Great Depression and the Second World War, where essentially the global arrangement for geopolitics, for economics, technology, all of these were rearranged in a very fundamental way. I think we are going through something very similar right now. Now, why am I telling you this? Is because the way to think about the future is not to think of it as a reinflation of the pre-COVID world. This is an entry into a post-COVID world where many, many moving parts will be quite different. So the geopolitics, the technologies, consumer behavior, you name it, everything will be fundamentally different, and they will all be interacting with each other in unpredictable ways. So this explains to some extent the particular approach we have taken in India to deal with the COVID crisis, which may be somewhat different from what others have done, and many people may have found it even quite puzzling, which is that we have actually been, for the last 6 months, while we were under lockdown, not been trying to aggressively reinflate demand. You may have noticed that. We have even come under some criticism for it. Our focus was essentially to provide a cushion and a safety net on the demand side. So therefore, provide some cushion for the MSME sector, provide food for the very vulnerable sections of society, provide them with some money through the Jan Dhan and so on. But remember, we were not trying aggressively to reinflate the economy. The thinking was that we had our foot firmly on the brake. There's no point in pressing the accelerator. Now, as we pull our foot off the accelerator, we are slowly beginning to press the, as we pulled our foot off the brake, we are slowly beginning to press the accelerator. And that you saw a bunch of measures yesterday for getting retail consumer spending going again. We will do more going forward, particularly on infrastructure spending. So as far as our strategy is concerned, is to nurse back the demand side of the economy using this step-by-step approach, which we have now been doing for quite some time. But in addition to this, we have, and very unlike most other countries, put a lot of emphasis on the supply side, which is structural reform. And we have used this time to put in place some very difficult, long-delayed measures, whether it's on liberalizing the agriculture sector, reforming the labor markets, a whole bunch of measures for the financial markets like bilateral netting, factoring, and so on. Why are we doing this? Because the new world, this post-COVID world that we are talking about, is fundamentally difficult to predict. When you go through a major structural change like the one we have, then the best response you can do is the following. is invest into adaptability and flexibility on one hand, and resilience on the other. So what we are doing is essentially investing in these two things. So when you were talking about flexibility in labor markets, flexibility in agriculture markets, flexibility in terms of the CDS markets and in the financial markets and so on, what are we doing? We're building in flexibility into the system. We're trying to do that with land rights as well. You may have seen the Prime Minister distributing property right cards. We are doing a lot of digitization. So why are we doing that? We are basically creating a system of flexibility. On the other side, we are also simultaneously looking at resilience. Now, in this context, a lot of discussion happens about Atmanirbhar Bharat. Let me clarify that self-reliance does not mean a return to some 1950s notion of import substitution, nor is it a return to license permit Raj or some version of Sarkar Nirbhar Bharat. We are trying to rethink how this economy will function. And as I said, before I stop, let me emphasize the two words. Two things are important to this for this post-COVID world. One is flexibility and our ability to be able to grab the opportunities of this new world. And two, resilience against whatever new shocks and problems that this new world will also bring to us.
Sanjeev Sanyal, it's been an absolute pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 Leadership Collective. Appreciate your time and appreciate your participation here on this special brainstorm.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back. You're watching the CNBC TV 18 special presentation where we're talking about the agenda to make India the new factory of the world. And we've got a great panel lined up for you here on the program this evening. Let me introduce you to them. Joining us is Shereen, the CEO of India for Standard Chartered Bank. Also with us, Ashu Suyash, the Managing Director and CEO of CRISIL. Martin Schwenk, the MD and CEO of Mercedes-Benz India, William Blair, the Vice President and Chief Executive of Lockheed Martin India, Suresh Narayanan, the Chairman, National Committee of Food Processing Industries at CII and the Head of Nestle here in India, Sharat Tyagi, the MD of Boehringer Ingelheim India and the President of Industry Body OPPI. Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for joining us here on the program. Martin Schwenk, let me start by asking you, because Mercedes-Benz has been in India for over 2 decades now. You've been a believer in the India story. In the context of this move towards localization, make in India for the world, what are the opportunities and more specifically the challenges that you foresee?
I think as everyone in the industry, we really believe in the potential of the Indian market. We believe there is mid and long term a massive and tremendous potential, but at the same time, let me say it has not developed to the potential we could have seen already in the past. If we look into the auto industry, I would on the one hand look at the luxury car industry, which has never sold more than 40,000 cars. But if you expand that a little bit into, say, premium market, which is then every car above 20 lakh, you would only still find 200,000 cars being sold annually. And I think if you talk about challenges, then it all goes down to volume.
William Blair, the Vice President and Chief Executive of Lockheed Martin India, with us as well. William, the government has identified defense as a sector where it is pushing growth aggressively. Of course, the government is the biggest procurer when it comes to defense and the only procurer when it comes to defense. There have been several changes made. For instance, the FDI limits being hiked. There is a new acquisition policy in place. There is a new negative list in place. What does all of this mean then for your future plans in India? You've also been here for more than 2 decades. What is it going to mean in terms of more joint ventures here in India, for instance, for you?
Improvements coming forth now with the 74% FDI gives us a great opportunity to find ways to invest more at the same time that the defense acquisition procedure has been updated, and it includes a strategic partner component as to how we can partner with the private sector. And it also has a Buy Global Make in India initiative or acquisition model inside of it that allows us to establish a much greater presence here.
But let me bring Shereen Daruvala of Standard Chartered into the conversation. Shereen, many thanks for joining us. We're here talking about the opportunity that India presents. And This in the context of the fact that we're seeing a global economic reset on account of COVID and also on account of trade tensions and geopolitical tensions. Where does India find itself in terms of positioning to take advantage of some of those changes, Shereen? What do you believe are the strengths?
If you look at Vietnam, FDI as a percentage of GDP, it has varied between 6.2% to 9.7%. India is at 1.8%. The second important thing is when China was at the kind of GDP level that India is in 2005, actually China received 3.5 to 4% FDI annually for many, many years. I think it's important to really, really step up, almost double the FDI that we are receiving. Second important thing is the kind of FDI that we are getting. Is it going into greenfield and brownfield investment? That's also extremely important. While it's any FDI is welcome, but what is the multiplier effect, the quality of FDI which is coming, that's also extremely important for the country.
Sharat Tyagi, the MD of Boehringer Ingelheim and the president of OPPI is with us. Sharat, many thanks for joining us. What's the response to the PLI scheme? To Shereen's point, FDI in greenfield projects will perhaps have a much higher multiplier impact. That's what the government is hoping for as well, which is why it's specific to greenfield projects. What's the investor appetite?
When an investor or an investing multinational is looking at India, they are looking at several things, including stability of policies. They are looking at absolutely contract reinforcement, and not just reinforcement, but timely reinforcement. I think the time it can take for companies to be able to enforce their contracts and contractual obligations is extremely key. You can't take a very long time to do it. So just certain actions, whether it's on the basis of taxation or on the basis of any other scheme, is not going to just help. And in the case of pharmaceutical industries, even more important is how well do we respect IP and innovation, because it comes as a complete holistic package. It's not just you pick out one or two pieces and then you say that India is looking attractive.
Let me bring Suresh Narayanan into the conversation. As the head of Nestle here in India, Nestle, no stranger to India, has been a committed long-term India investor for decades now. Mr. Narayanan, let me start by asking you a question that's coming to us. Ravindra Raju has written in saying, what are the top 3 enablers that could help make India the world's new factory? Let me ask you that in the context of what you've been able to do here in India, the kind of investments that you've been able to drive, the capacity that you've set up.
Thank you, Shereen. I think, we have been talking here about pharmaceuticals and aircrafts and cars, but I think the food processing industry is an industry where India must have a domain advantage, and there are a couple of reasons for it. I believe that there are a couple of reasons why companies choose to invest in India in the food processing sector, and I call it the 6 M's. The first M is market advantage. You can't run away from it. The fact is that we have 130 crore people. We are the 6th largest food and grocery business in the world. And I think if you're going to walk away from that, I think it's a sad opportunity that is missed. We have a material advantage, whether you look at milk, 176 million tons, whether you look at grains and pulses, we are the 2nd highest in the world, and whether you look at fruits and vegetables, also we are the 2nd highest in the world, with less than 10 to 15% being actually processed. So there is a domain advantage here in terms of material advantage. Third, in terms of manpower advantage. Manpower advantage, I think we have been here, Shereen, for 60 years in manufacturing, 108 years as a company. And I can tell you that we have trained more than 7,600 people in this country who are very, very capable and very, very astute and very knowledgeable people in the food processing industry. So therefore, I think running 8 factories and putting up the 9th one, I can tell you there is enough of a manpower advantage that we have got. The 4th one, I call it the maneuvering advantage, which is really the ability to do business. I think one of the things which I would really suggest as a humble suggestion to the government is, we are looking at attracting foreign direct investment. I think if we spent about 20% or 25% of the time in looking at existing manufacturers in this country and how we can enable them to do better, I think you can extract a lot more juice, certainly from this sector. The fifth one is the manufacturing advantage, and I believe that we have, as a company, some of the most sophisticated factories in India, some facilities out of Europe. In fact, the second location in the world is India, and I'm very, very proud of that and of what we are capable of doing as a country. And the last one, of course, is the mandate of viability, sustainability, and acceleration. I think this was brought out by Shereen quite well. That we are competing with investment dollars of all the other Southeast Asian countries, including China as well. And therefore, I think it's important for us to look at a mandate of viability, sustainability, and acceleration. So 6 M's is what I would look at, and we've had a good experience on this. I think there are areas that we can progress, but overall terms, it has been a very satisfying journey of 60 years in this country.
And Ashu, cost of production is going to have to be a factor as companies weigh making either fresh investments or moving investments from other geographies here to India. How does the India stack look when you compare us?
So if one just looks at cost of production, India does not have that full advantage. There are some areas where India competes very effectively. When you think about the cost of labor, it works. But when you think about skill sets, we still have a long way to go. And that is why one of the focus areas for the government is around vocational training for employability of our people. If I think about a lot of other areas, India does not become very competitive. And if you think about the work that China did nearly 2 decades ago, and where India is today, we have a long way to go. Take example of power, right? Cost of power, we are competitive. But if you think about the efficiency around it, or if you think about logistics, right, very expensive. And that's simply because a bulk of the transportation used is roads, whereas rail and waterways tends to be far more cost effective.
Martin Schwenk, William Blair, Suresh Narayanan, Sharat Tyagi, Zareen Daruwala, Ashu Suyash, many thanks for joining us here on the CNBC TV 18 Leadership Collective to take us through your ideas, your thoughts, your insights, and your view on the road to recovery and growth. Appreciate your time here on CNBC TV 18. We've got a very special guest with us, CEO of Niti Aayog, Amitabh Kant.
Ladies and gentlemen, I thank CNBC TV 18 and Standard Chartered Bank for inviting me to deliver the keynote address of the Leadership Collective, India, World's New Factory. I strongly believe that India is poised to become the next factory of the world as the global economy recovers from the crippling effects of the pandemic. It is no surprise that the pandemic-induced lockdowns have impacted the global economy severely. The International Monetary Fund has indicated that global growth will contract by minus 4.9% in 2020, much worse than the global financial crisis of 2009 and the worst economic decline since the Great Depression in the 1930s. India's economy also saw a deep contraction in the first quarter of this year. Only agriculture recorded growth in the first quarter, with all other sectors witnessing contraction. However, the closer we get to a vaccine, the sooner we'll see the global and Indian economies recover and recover rapidly. Global rating agency Standard & Poor's has said that it sees the country recovering strongly from the slowdown this year. It has projected GDP growth in the next fiscal at turbocharged 8.5%. There are early signs of recovery. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index, PMI, rose to 56.8 in September, recording its highest levels since January 2012. Sharp increase in new business inflows, a renewed expansion in new export orders drove expansion. Business confidence also seems to be rising accordingly to the survey, resulting in the strongest degree of overall optimism in 4 years. Services activity continues to improve, with the services PMI coming in at 49.8 in September 2020, rising from levels of 41.8 in August. The Prime Minister's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat was about using the domestic strength to become a major exporting nation. We must create an environment where the private sector can thrive, take global competition head-on, and drive India's socio-economic transition. We must also realize that this is about Atmanirbhar Bharat is about making India self-confident and self-reliant to take on global competition. It is about driving India's socio-economic transformation. And therefore, India needs to further develop its competitiveness at both the macro and micro level to take its rightful place in global supply chain. And as the world battled contraction, India has taken bold moves of initiating reforms in key sectors. We've had the historic reforms in agriculture, greater competition, transparency, and private sector participation in the coal sector. The labor codes on industrial relations, occupancy, health and working conditions, and social security have been passed. And together with the revised definition for MSMEs, where the investment limit for micro, small, and medium enterprises has been raised substantially, these labor laws will go a long way towards ensuring that India's manufacturing sector is competitive in global markets. Several reforms have already been carried out, and many more will follow. India is at the cusp of a transformative change. The global pandemic may have hampered our efforts in the march towards an upper middle income and then a high income country, but our fundamentals remain strong. India's growth story is only beginning. By turning this crisis into opportunity, we have set India on a growth path that will drive our social transformation. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.